morning. Welcome to Having Your Say. I am one of your co-hosts, Diana Robertson, president of the Mainline Branch NAACP, and our other co-host, Ann Minicozzi, who is the founder and director of the Community Breakfast. And this morning, our topic of focus is voting registration. And we have as our special guest, Roberta Winters, who's with the League of Women Voters. Thank you for coming and joining us this morning.
It's my pleasure to be here.
I want to start first by saying that before we turned the camera on, we talked about how we really needed to narrow down what we were going to talk about today. We're going to focus specifically on voter registration. There are many issues that attach to that, but we're just going to focus on voter registration today. But before we get into the topic, Roberta, could you introduce yourself? We've been to meetings together and all kinds of things together, but just a chance for you to introduce yourself, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Ann. It's really been a pleasure knowing you, Ann. I remember when you first were in our neighborhood, which is in Garrett Hill, and were running for office and came door to door.
That was a long time ago.
That was when I was teaching. I was teaching at Ithan Elementary School, and I worked in the Radnor schools for over 30 years. And after I retired, I became involved in the League of Women Voters. And that's a good place to become involved civically, because I've realized in my life that many of the decisions that affect us every day are clearly political ones, and voting is the most important thing we can do to express our voice.
Good. Good. Yes, that was a long time ago when I ran for commissioner. And you are president of the League of Women Voters in Radnor right now, but I know you've been president previously.
Right. I was involved with the Teachers Association in Radnor, where I had a leadership role. When I retired in 2006, I became more active in the League of Women Voters and moved to the state board of the League of Women Voters, where I was Issues and Action vice president and was involved in advocacy on issues across the state. My specialty was fracking and pipelines.
Okay.
After several years there, I realized that the strength of an organization really begins at its grassroots. And that's why I've focused my efforts over the last few years to really build a strong local league, because all politics is local.
Right. Good. Good. And a couple questions. What grade did you teach when you were teaching at Ithan Elementary?
I taught mostly gifted students in the elementary schools, and I worked with students from 1st through 4th and 5th grade.
Okay. Okay.
But I started at Rosemont School before it closed.
Right, which was on Conestoga Road, across the street from Radnor United Methodist Church.
And I could walk to school, and once I went to Ithan, I biked to school. So.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Can we talk for a second about the League of Women Voters and what's happening in 2020, which is the 100th anniversary of a woman's right to vote? And then we'll get into, I promise, the topic.
Well, the League of Women Voters' mission is to make sure everyone who is eligible to vote is registered to vote, participates in the voting process, and becomes civically engaged. We like to have people informed about the issues, because women were not allowed to vote because, first of all, we were deemed not smart enough to vote, and secondly, we didn't understand the issues. So those have continued to be our key focuses in terms of getting out the vote and making sure people understand the issues. That's why we have positions on key topics, from immigration to healthcare reform to public education, things that are near and dear to our hearts.
Right. Now, the NAACP is a nonpartisan organization, and so is the League of Women Voters.
Correct.
And I know that the NAACP also does voter registration and have forums and things like that.
Yes.
So there are some similarities between the couple of organizations, would you say?
Right. Well, yes, there are some similarities. I think the League of Women's Voter have, in terms of making sure in all the different areas of not only the issues but the candidates who are running on the ballot and all of that, where we're focusing more on just the voter registration, and we do try to educate about the different issues, and our real focus is getting people out to vote. Right. Because there seems to have been a drop, especially when it comes to what they call the midterm elections. So those that are not presidential elections, people have a tendency to think that they do not. It's not important for them to get out to vote, but it extremely is, and we would say sometimes even more important.
Right.
So.
Right. And we were even talking before we turned the camera on that we'll have a separate show just about getting out the vote.
Yes.
Because that's a whole other aspect.
Right.
We came up with about 4 different shows after talking about, what we're going to talk about today. So let's get to voter registration then. So what's really where do you want to start on that? The deadline?
I think the deadlines are always good to know, and then you can work backwards.
Right.
Right.
One of the things that we've learned as the League of Women Voters is it's always wise to work in coalition with other groups such as the NAACP, such as our local colleges and universities and our local high schools. The deadline is October 9th, and there are 2 ways to register to vote. One is you can register online, and the second is to register on paper. Now, the League provides cards that look like this, which give you www.votespa.com. That is the one-stop shopping for everything you need to know about voter registration.
Good.
And you then can do this online, and the students who are very much more adept with technology than I am just do it right on their cell phones.
Right on their phone.
Yep.
And you can actually take your picture of your signature and upload it. So if you don't have a driver's license, you can still register to vote. And if you don't have your driver's license, you can put in the last 4 digits of your social security number to help identify you. But the signature, which sometimes is a challenge for people who don't have the driver's ID and they don't have all these other things, can just be snapped,
Wow,
uploaded,
that's amazing.
and they're all set. So that's really made a difference for our young folks who want to register to vote. The other thing you can do, and I noticed that you have a copy right here, and there is a paper voter registration form. These are available.
That's my generation, the paper.
These cards and these forms are usually available at your local libraries. We do make sure they are available in Radnor. And you can see there's a registration application. It's not that long. And it just includes your eligibility. You need to be 18 years old.
Okay.
You need to be a U.S. citizen. And then, in fact, you have to live for a certain period of time in Pennsylvania. I believe it's 30 days.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you've only lived a short period of time, you can file an absentee ballot and vote at your previous location. So you need to respond truthfully to these questions. And there's also a line if you just want to change your name and address. Like I know, Ann, you used to live in Garrett Hill.
Right.
Now you live in a different ward. So you
Right.
had to change your address.
Right.
Then
And-
I was mailed a new card from the county.
Right. And then also, like my daughter got married and she had to change her name. So that's an important thing you need to do as well. Fill out the form. They ask for your driver's license number. If you have a driver's license, everything is much, much simpler. Did you notice that when you did
Yes.
voter?
Yes.
If someone has a Pennsylvania state ID, does that have a similar kind of number as the driver's license so people can use that?
Yes, they can.
Okay.
They can substitute that, but a lot of people don't go to the Department of Motor Vehicles
To
to
get
get
that.
that ID.
Right.
But that's another whole issue about voter ID. So then you further fill out the form, and there are 2 areas that people have the most trouble with, in my experience. One is the county. People
Yes,
don't know
their
we live
county.
in Delaware County.
Right.
But if you're watching the show and you live in Ardmore, you live in Montgomery
Montgomery
County.
County.
Right.
If you live in Berwyn, you live in Chester County.
Right.
So these forms, if you notice, go to your local county. So you need to know what county you live in. And then, what municipality do you live in? Do you live in Wayne now?
No, we have all those train stations.
So where do you live?
Station.
What's your address?
It's Villanova,
Villanova.
but that's not my township.
That's not your. That's not your municipality. That's not
Right.
your township. There's no such place as Wayne. Did you know that?
No.
When you have to register, you can't put down Wayne.
Wayne.
You can put
Is
that
it-
down as your street address.
Oh,
But I
okay,
have a whole list, believe it or
Okay.
not, of all of the different municipalities that exist in our counties.
Right.
So if
Oh,
you live in
okay.
Delaware County, you may have to be anywhere. These are all Delaware County, from the city of Chester all the way to Upper Providence. So it's important that you know your county and your municipality. So we live in Radnor Township. That's our municipality. You can't put down Wayne, you can't put down Villanova,
Right.
you can't put down Garrett Hill. Doesn't work. So these are the, so make sure you know, and the league always has a list with them, and you might want to have a list too.
Right, I was going to say that would be
Because
helpful.
that's really
yes.
helpful when you have
Yeah.
to register people to
We
vote.
can get
Now,
that list.
the people who are able to view this show can see it in Radnor, Lower Merion, and Narberth. Narberth is a borough, so then you just put Narberth.
Well,
It's not a township per se.
this is Montgomery County municipalities.
So how do they
Narberth
have
Borough
Narberth
is one of them.
Narberth Borough. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, and you
Okay, so that
can,
covers our whole Radnor Studio 21 mainline television area.
and
viewing
Lower
area.
Marion Township is also your municipality, as is
Right.
Radnor
Okay.
Township for us in Delaware County.
Right.
So it is a little tricky.
That it is tricky for our area. In other places in the country, it's probably much more straightforward.
Well,
We
nothing's,
have all these train stops along the main line, so everybody thinks that's their town. Yeah.
but it doesn't
Yeah,
work that
good.
way.
So we have corrected that.
The other place, when you get further down the list for voter registration forms, once you've solved the problem with where you live, there is areas where you have, there are optional areas that you can fill in, and there also are a way that you can put down a party affiliation. So you
right.
know you never can give even a hint to anyone if you're registering them to vote about a party affiliation.
Right.
So
you have to be nonpartisan when you're doing voter registration.
the League of Women Voters is nonpartisan. Anyone who's registering you to vote should be nonpartisan, or else they're in big trouble.
Right.
Okay. yeah.
What you can say is this: if someone says, "Well, should I register R or D or independent?" What you say is this: you may register as you choose, but Pennsylvania has a closed primary. So
Yes.
that means unless you're registered as a Republican or a Democrat, you do
can't
not
vote.
have a choice as to whom the candidates will be on future ballots.
Right. So you can't vote at the primary
Right.
unless there are some kind of special issues.
Right, if there's a special referendum item on the ballot, or it's a special election, like we had to elect a new commissioner the last primary election,
Right.
you can vote on that. But in terms of selecting candidates to serve as party people on the next ballot, you cannot do that unless you're Republican or Democrat. You also need to know that you can change that affiliation at any time,
Right.
Yes.
by, except within 30 days of an election.
Okay.
You cannot
There's a
register.
cutoff.
There's a cutoff. That's
Yeah.
why October 9th is the cutoff
Right.
for voter registration or any changes that you need to make.
Okay.
Further, you can go down, and one of the most interesting things that I found is you can actually have somebody fill this form out for you. Did you know that?
Right. And then that person
And then
would put their name that they assisted in completing the application.
So if you're handicapped in some way, you broke your right arm, you can't fill it out,
Right.
somebody can fill it out and write down their name that they've assisted you.
Okay.
Did you have
good.
any questions about that?
No.
Yeah, you've done
That's
a lot
good.
of voter registration.
Yeah. Yeah.
Usually, people who register you will take this to media for you or to Norristown if you're Montgomery
Right.
County. But you need a stamp otherwise. And stamps aren't always available
Available.
today, particularly for students. And that's another issue with the students that you've worked with at Villanova. Their addresses are tricky.
Right. They have to
wanna-
put down their dorm, and I think that's the main thing. They have to put down where their residence hall is.
So they have to
Because
put down
there's
the
4
street
different
address.
wards that are involved in Radnor Township in terms of where students are housed, at least on Villanova's campus.
So Villanova is divided into 4 different wards. So they not only put down the Lancaster address, street address of Villanova, they put down
Their residence hall.
their
yeah.
residence hall.
And probably Bryn Mawr College may all be in the same ward, but those kind of people would have to really look themselves and see, are they in a different ward?
For Haverford College. We have many
Right,
colleges
all
and
the colleges,
universities,
Cabrini.
Right,
Eastern,
right.
Cabrini, and some of them are divided up. So
Right.
you have to list
You
your
have to-
dorm.
yeah, a lot of details. Actually, it's really good to have a voter registration drive because then you can make sure that things are filled out completely and correctly, so you can vote in that election.
Right.
And it's not, once you've registered to vote, you shouldn't just say, well, I sent it in, I'm all set, I've texted it. You need to go
check it.
back to that votespa.com. I always say vote spa, this is the main line.
Okay, yeah.
Votespa.com.
Oh, PA.com.
Votespa.com, so that you can check to make sure it actually went through. I know the last
Yeah.
election there were some questions about timelines and were things submitted appropriately. So make sure you check, because you don't want to go to the polls and find out that you were not registered.
And the other thing that we check on too is for people, I usually ask the question as to whether they've been voting, because there have been issues on some of the names being purged from the list, and so they can go online as well to check to make sure that they're still considered active and that they believe that they're registered to vote, and they can confirm that they are.
Now, I have a card that I keep in my wallet, which I know I don't have to present at the polling place, that says my name and what ward and precinct I'm registered to vote in. Are they still sending those paper cards from the county? So that
Yes.
ought to come within a couple of weeks of when you register.
I think they say within 30 days. So
Okay.
it's
It's still easier to check online then.
You can check online, and hopefully you will get that card. And that card is very important, because you might want to have that card with you the first time you vote
Right.
at the polling place.
I think you do have to have it the first time you vote, and then after that you don't have to present it.
Well, you have a variety of things you can present when you go to vote as a first-time voter at a polling place. And some of those things could be your passport, your driver's license, a government-issued photo ID. They need some official documentation, even a student ID, that you, in fact, are living where you say you're living. So that could include a current bank statement.
Right.
It could be your utility bill. So there are lots of different things you can show, but it's important that they know who you are and where you live.
Right. Right. The other thing that raised a question for me, if someone goes to the polls and is told that they can't vote, they can always file a ballot anyway, and then the county will sort it out in their office. So no one should go away from the polling place without voting.
Right, and that's called a provisional ballot.
That's it, provisional ballot.
And sometimes people are turned away from the polls because they've gone to the wrong ward, or they've gone to they didn't get the registration up on time. And the provisional ballots are counted and included in the vote. So don't be alarmed if you just have to go through another step. It's
Right.
worth the effort, because if you don't vote, you have no voice.
Right.
Absolutely. And on that note, another group of folks that sometimes do not realize that they are eligible to register to vote are those who have been incarcerated. And in Pennsylvania, once you've been released, your voting rights have been restored, and you can then register to vote.
Right.
So some people do not believe that they can, but yes.
But they can.
That
Yeah.
They absolutely can.
Yeah.
And the League of Women Voters worked very hard to make sure that released felons, misdemeanants, and pretrial detainees can also vote.
Okay.
And it's really important that even convicted felons in jail on election day, however, cannot vote.
Okay.
But if you've been released, because I know I saw a gentleman at the P&W stop, and he said, "Oh no, I can't vote because I'm a released felon." I said, "Oh no, you can."
You can.
So
yes.
there's a lot of misunderstanding about that.
Because that's one of those things that actually will vary from state to state.
Right.
But in Pennsylvania, you can.
You know, one of the things you didn't mention that I thought you might be aware of is the fact that, you can get these voter registration forms and the online information in a zillion languages.
Okay.
If you go to the Vote Spa PA, it'll list you different languages you can get all this information in. So if you became a naturalized citizen and you do not know or not fluent as well as you would like to be with the language, you can use the
It's a site.
site to find out. And usually, if I've gone to the voter registration office in media, they will provide you with forms in Spanish.
Oh, okay.
So that it's very helpful if you're working in a community where the English may not be a first language, or those that you're working with might not be familiar, that you have available some Spanish applications so that they can feel more comfortable and know that they're answering the questions truthfully.
Right.
Okay.
Another thing that I wanted to bring up is if you want to register to vote when you're renewing your driver's license, our locations have changed. So when I renewed my driver's license, I went to Ardmore on Greenfield Avenue. Now there's a small area inside the AAA store. And then I saw online that there's a AAA store on Lancaster Avenue in Wayne, 849 West Lancaster Avenue in Wayne. So you should be able to go in there when you renew your license, and you can, if you wanted to change your party or just register to vote, you could do it in those 2 locations too.
You may wish to call them first. I think different AAA offices may have different ways in which they operate.
Right, different hours. Yep.
So
when
I
that
think it's
area is
always
open.
wise to call ahead because it's a trip for some people.
Yep. Yep.
Right. So what about issues and things that may be on the ballot that we don't necessarily talk about ahead of time? How do we inform individuals about that?
Well, the League of Women Voters has been very active in producing these items here. And Alex Yiannopoulos, who is a student, came up with an idea when we registered students at the high school, particularly because not everybody thinks that, unless it's a presidential election, it's not worth voting for. But we know from our work that it's those local elections that are the most important. And this is a midterm election where we will be electing the governor. The governor has a lot of power in the Pennsylvania because he can veto legislation. He can also coordinates things like all the emergency response teams that we have, and we've just seen what's happened in North Carolina. And he also appoints all the leaders of the state agencies. So if you care about higher education or environmental issues, he has a lot of power in who's running those groups. Then there's a lieutenant governor, and we never know what's going to happen to the governor. So if something should happen to him, having someone next in line and having that person be qualified to assume those duties is also critical.
Right.
Then we've also heard about all the discussion in Washington. And our U.S. senators and U.S. representatives play a key role in some of the big issues that our country is facing right now. And I've been very, let's put it this way, taken back that I have no U.S. representative right now because Representative Meehan resigned.
Right.
So when I have an issue that's being addressed in the House, I have no voice. So it's very important that we have people who can do things in Congress, like the senator who we are going to be electing, who will have the power to support or block nominees for such positions as the Supreme Court that we're hearing a lot about today.
Absolutely.
They determine things like health care. This is all of our elected officials, the health care, military funding, school funding. They also decide, things like if we go to war. That's an important issue.
Right.
Absolutely.
They decide taxes. There are so many things that are in their bailiwick. We need to consider the qualifications of those people running and also how we feel our voice should be best expressed. Then the state level, you know what happens at the state. Well, they're dealing with, again, the education, but specifically because education is a state responsibility.
Yeah.
That affects our property taxes.
Right.
That affects a lot of things. Our health care system, whether they want to expand Medicare or not expand Medicare. They deal with environmental regulations, clean waters, clean streams, clean air. A lot of the kids might care if we legalize marijuana, That's a big issue. We just got medicinal marijuana through the last House. They also take care of things like the potholes and the rails and the things that impact how we get back and forth between one part of our Commonwealth and another. And the state taxes, 6% here, gasoline tax there. And for most young people, we're worried about minimum wage, right?
Right.
How much are you going to get paid when you have to have that summer job? So all of these things are affected by how we vote this election. So we have a deadline to maintain. You need to register to vote by October 9th. And actually, National Voter Registration Day is this Tuesday.
Yes.
It's September
Oh, my.
25th, so I thought I'd give you a sticker.
And I'd like to
And you a
have one
sticker.
too. Thank you.
To remind people that if you register in September, you'll be ready to vote in November.
Right.
Okay.
So that's the slogan, and it's a really good one.
Okay.
National Voter Registration Day is September 25th. The next day is the community breakfast of the main line, Undoing Racism Day. And I know you'll be there if anyone wants to register to vote or get any information. We'll have some time before we start the program, our conversation that we're having there, which will be good. I wanted to ask you also, you were talking about Alex Yiannopoulos doing, can you describe for our viewing audience what the EdTernship program is?
Well,
because it looked like it was a great experience for him to work on this.
Well, Alex was really not an EdTern this year, but the League of Women Voters has offered free student memberships to anybody all the way through graduate school until 2020, when we actually have our 100th anniversary. And so I have been involved and encouraging lots of young people to get involved, and Alex is one who has been passionate about government and local government for many years.
Oh, very good.
Alex has done a wonderful job. He's worked with us on interviewing people. He's worked with us on ways to encourage residents to get involved in local government, from serving on committees to working in different agencies that work to help what happens in Radnor Township and beyond.
Very good. He may think about running for public office someday.
Well, I
and
know-
some of the other young people that you're working with too.
So we are very excited to be involved at this time of year when voter registration is so important, and we will continue to encourage people to get out the vote.
Very good. And 2020 will be the big 100th anniversary celebration of a woman's right to vote. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what the League of Women Voters nationally is going to do to celebrate the whole year, or what's going to be happening. So that's coming up before you know it.
Right.
Okay, great. Well, we hope that our viewing audience has heard a lot of important information, and that as you, as a registered voter, tell other people who may or may not be registered to vote to make sure that they do so prior to October the 9th. So,
Good.
And votespa.com is the place to go.
Very
online.
good.
Okay. So, Anne, do you have any concluding remarks?
Well, I can say thank you for tuning in to Radnor Studio 21 and to having your say. And I'd like to thank Roberta Winters, President of the League of Women Voters of Radnor Township, for being our guest today. And thanks to my co-host, Diana Robertson, President of the NAACP Mainline Branch. I'm Ann Minicozzi from the Community Breakfast Undoing Racism Day, and we'll see you again. Thank you.